So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on Collins Foundation and Foundation Plus, preparation for CAIE Stage 1 by Dr. Elaine Higgleton. Dr. Elaine Higgleton has nearly 30 years experience in dictionary, reference, and educational publishing and has held various roles during her career. She has experience of teaching English as a foreign language at secondary school level. Am I audible?
Yes.
I just got a message. Okay, I'm sorry. And first year university level, having taught at the Sorbonne in Paris. In the course of her career in publishing, she has held roles working as a lexicographer on a range of dictionaries, including dictionaries, grammar, and other reference materials for ELT, and has managed the publishing of Collins dictionaries, including the Scrabble list and dictionaries for India and China. Since 2012, she has been international publisher for Collins Learning, and in this capacity, helped with the initial setup of Collins India, and continues to lead the development of the strategy and publishing for the highly successful educational list for the Caribbean, and plays a major role in key projects in the Middle East. She also leads on publishing for Cambridge Assessment International Education. During the course of her career, she has given presentation on different aspects of English at several conferences and has run hundreds of workshops for teachers focusing on ELT teaching skills and helping teachers to develop their own English language skills. So we welcome you, Dr. Elaine. And before we begin the webinar, I would request all the school leaders and educators to please use the chat window for communicating with us. You can even unmute and ask your queries. And please sit back and enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Dr. Elaine. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. It's very good to have so many of you here with us. I'm going to talk today about the progression and syllabus development that we've put together for Collins Foundation and Foundation Plus, which ensures that the course is a perfect preparation for students aiming to do Cambridge Stage 1. I'll just give you a very short introduction to the course in case you didn't join our presentation yesterday, which will be available on YouTube shortly. Collins Foundation and Foundation Plus is a 2-year course for English, science and maths that leads to Cambridge Stage 1. It comprises an activity book for each term, a reading anthology. There's one reading anthology a term for English and one reading anthology a year for maths and science, plus a teacher's guide. The ethos and the pedagogy that we've adapted, that we've taken in this course, is explained in a webinar that you can watch on YouTube that was given by Arabella Koopman, who was one of our consultants. And Arabella has a lot of experience of early years teaching in a multilingual setting, which is very important for a course for young kindergarten students who may be starting in a school where they're speaking in English, but who speak something else at home with their mums and dads. So please watch this video for the pedagogy. It's a 2-year course for nursery and kindergarten in international schools. Schools can opt to use only one subject, so English or maths, which are core, or to use 2 or more subjects for a more comprehensive package. The science course isn't really proper science. It's an opportunity to do project work and topic work that allows young students to develop the skill of working like a scientist. So to develop the skills of looking at something, observing what's going on, of describing and of drawing, all within the context of practicing English. It's a course that leads to Cambridge Stage 1, as I've said. So the course was written by a range of authors who all work in international schools. Fiona McGregor, who is a writer and materials developer with over 30 years of experience, a lot of which is in early years education. Peter Clark, who is an internationally renowned maths teacher, coordinator, head teacher and author, and who works on lots of Collins international maths materials, and Arabella Koopman, who advises on the science, but who also looked at all of the progression and the approach materials that we developed, who has worked as a preschool teacher in South Africa, which, as you all know, is a multilingual environment, a multilingual society. So she's very interested in how we get children who start in a school on day one who can't speak any English at all or very little English, how we can get them from that kind of situation to be ready for first year of primary in English. So she's very much has lots of experience in multilingual classrooms. And we also had an international review panel who reviewed the materials for us as we developed them and worked through them, who tried them out in their classrooms, who critiqued them, who gave us feedback. Now, the review panel was an international review panel with teachers and schools from all over the world taking part, but I'd like here to say a special thank you to the schools and teachers from India who were on our review panel. The teachers from Mantan School in Hyderabad, Prometheus School in Noida, Pragyanam School in Gurugram, Solitaire Global School also in Hyderabad, and a big thank you to the Calcutta International School team who gave us a lot of help and a lot of support. So thank you very much to all of the teachers in India and all of the teachers worldwide who helped us develop these materials. So I'm going to talk more today about the syllabus development and progression and how this course has been carefully put together with all international curricula in mind, but really focusing today on how the materials prepare students for stage 1, Cambridge stage 1. As I said, it's a 2-year course that leads to stage 1. It does provide, however, structure and materials to support those of you who follow the International Baccalaureate Primary Years programme. Now, it's very important, first of all, that you ignore this little bit of messaging on the cover. The course and the books have been produced for international markets from Brazil to Zambia, covering everywhere in between, including markets in the Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, and Europe. So the sales team wanted to put suitable for KG1 and suitable for KG2 on the covers, but this is not messaging for schools in India. Please ignore this. When we're thinking about which levels are suitable for which schools in India, we work back from Cambridge stage 1. So in India, in international schools, most of you do Cambridge stage 1 in upper kindergarten. So this means that you would start foundation in nursery, do foundation plus in lower kindergarten to give you the preparation that you need for Cambridge stage 1, which you typically start in upper kindergarten. So please ignore suitable for KG1, suitable for KG2 on the cover. This is not for India, that's for other markets where they would do foundation in KG1. In India, your school system works a little bit differently. So foundation in nursery, foundation plus in lower kindergarten, Cambridge stage 1 in upper kindergarten. Now, I also know that, of course, that Cambridge have developed their own early years materials, and I haven't seen any of these materials, and I haven't seen their framework or their syllabus because they won't share it with me. But what Cambridge have done is to develop two pathways through their material. You either do EY1, EY2, and then go to Cambridge stage 1. But what Cambridge, I understand, really want you to do is EY1, EY2, EY3, miss Cambridge stage 1 and go straight to Cambridge stage 2. But Cambridge themselves, in their own marketing, publicly available, accept that if you do EY1, EY2, and EY3, your students will not be fully prepared for thinking and working mathematically, thinking and working scientifically, science in context, and linking reading and writing, which are all skills that are explicitly listed in the new primary frameworks that Cambridge have been using for the last year. So schools, Cambridge themselves admit that schools that follow EY1, EY2, EY3 are going to need extra support for these students, will need extra support for these areas once they get to Cambridge Stage 2. So I don't quite know why Cambridge have done it like this, but what Collins set out to do was to provide a very, very clear progression that would be seamless for teachers who are teaching Cambridge Stage 1 and who want to prepare their students for Cambridge Stage 1. It's very, very clear in Collins. You do foundation in nursery, you do foundation plus, and this will give you a seamless transition to Cambridge Stage 1. And this is how we've done it. This is how we've put it together with a progression to deliver that. So as you will know, there are prior learnings listed explicitly in the Cambridge primary frameworks for English, mother tongue, and maths. And these documents date from September 2021. So the first thing that our authors and our editors and our development team did was to look at these prior learnings and to assess them critically against what students are going to achieve or be expected to achieve in Stage 1. And the kinds of questions our authors and development editors ask themselves are, if students cover these prior learnings, are they going to be adequately prepared for everything that is going to be asked of them in Stage 1? Is there anything that students are going to be asked to do in Stage 1 that they should perhaps also be preparing for in the 2 years running up to Cambridge Stage 1? Is there anything perhaps that might be missing from the Cambridge prior learnings? So the first job that everybody did was to critically assess the Cambridge prior learnings against what students will achieve in Stage 1 and say, is there anything else that students should be doing in their early years that will give them a step up, that will help them, that will prepare them for what they're going to have to do in Stage 1? Now, of course, the Stage 1 learnings listed are what children will have achieved at the end of their Stage 1. So we're not trying to preempt what they're doing in Stage 1. We're just thinking, what else can we do to make students are prepared for these learning objectives? And we found this critical review showed us two things. It showed us, first of all, that there are steps between the prior learnings and the same or a very similar learning objective in Stage 1. There are steps that need to be teased out, fleshed out, and developed. So yes, on the face of it, the prior learnings look quite helpful, but how you go from that prior learning to that Stage 1 learning isn't clear. So we needed to make that explicit. And the second thing we found is that there are indeed some areas of some areas in Stage 1 where there is no pre-learning, nothing in the prior learnings, but actually there could be. We could introduce some additional things that will help students be really ready for Stage 1. So it's a case of teasing out the steps and of adding in some more. I'm going to talk you through some examples. These are, some of them are a little bit complicated, but bear with me. I'll do my best to talk through how we went about this. So I'm going to start with maths. So when we look at maths, geometry and measure, the prior learnings say that students should be, just make me move this, should name and sort commonly found at home or school 2D shapes and 3D shapes. Okay. And then when we get to Stage 1, we see in the same maths area, geometry, geometrical reasoning, shapes and measurements, that students are asked to be able to identify, describe and sort 2D shapes by their characteristics or properties, including reference to number of sides and whether the sides are curved or straight, use familiar language, identify, describe and sort 3D shapes by their properties, including reference to the number of faces, edges, whether faces are flat or curved, use familiar language to describe mass, etc., etc. So what we found looking at these learning objectives, looking at the prior learnings on the one hand, and what students will have achieved by the end of stage 1 on the other, we felt, our author and our development editors felt, we need to flesh out the stages between the prior learnings, which are very, very simply expressed, name and sort, some simple 2D shapes and some 3D shapes. We needed to flesh out some of the steps that will get you from the prior learnings and get you really ready for the stage 1 learnings. So we go from the prior learnings, name and sort commonly found at school or home, 2D, 3D shapes, to the stage 1 learnings in this way. In Collins Foundation, which is the first level, we take name and sort commonly found 2D, 3D shapes and say, okay, what we want children to be doing in Foundation is to start to understand shape by identifying, describing, comparing and sorting 2D shapes and identifying, describing, comparing and sorting 3D shapes. So we've already taken name and sort and made it a little bit more explicit, put a bit more flesh on the bones, developed it a little more. So that's what students are going to do in Foundation. And then in Foundation Plus, they're going to go further. They're going to start to describe their 2D shapes. They're going to start to talk about the number of sides. They're going to start to talk about whether the sides are curved or straight, whether 3D shapes, the number of faces they might have, and whether the faces are flat or curved. So we are starting to preempt the stage 1 learnings by putting a little more flesh and a little more detail into the progression that we have developed for geometry and measure in maths for Foundation and Foundation Plus. So the Cambridge prior learnings are fine, but what do they actually mean? We have fleshed that out and we've added a little bit to it because we feel that actually, if you're looking at circles and triangles with students, why not talk about a circle having a triangle having 3 sides? Why not talk about those 3 sides being straight lines? Why not talk about a circle having a circular line? Why not talk about a pyramid? Why not look at a pyramid in the classroom and talk about the fact the faces are all flat? So we go a little bit further, give a little bit more depth to the prior learnings that Cambridge list to make sure that students are really ready to encounter what they're going to be doing in stage 1. We're going to look at another example here, also from maths. So in stage 1, there is a requirement that students should be able to recite, read and write number names and whole numbers from 0 to 20. But when we look at the Cambridge prior learnings for number, there is very little there about what we want about actually writing. So we've got some mark making to represent number, which presumably means making lines, a number of lines. And we've got attempts at creating symbols to represent numbers. So our author looked at the prior learnings and thought, are these prior learnings really going to help students when they're going to start to write in stage 1? And what he's done is, again, he's looked at the prior learnings, looked at the stage 1 and filled in the details. So in Foundation, we take the prior learnings, mark making and attempts at creating symbols to represent numbers and actually say, why don't we learn, why don't we get students starting to recognize numerals from 1 to 5 and then 1 to 10? Why don't we get them actually starting to, yes, make some initial mark making, but then progress to writing some of these numerals? After all, we're doing maths hand in hand alongside English and topic work, and we're going to be starting to write letters in English why don't we start to actually write numerals in foundation in maths? So we're going a bit further than the prior learnings simply suggest might be needed. And then in Foundation Plus, we say, okay, we really want students to be comfortable reading and writing numerals from 0 to 10 and then 0 to 20 to make sure they are fully prepared for what they're going to be doing in stage 1. And here's another example, addition and subtraction. So addition and subtraction is clearly quite an important thing when we're looking at maths with very young children. And the stage 1 learnings are understand addition as counting on and combining 2 sets, understand subtraction as counting back, taking away and difference. But when we look at number in the Cambridge prior learnings, there's nothing there about addition. We've got counting, we've got one-to-one correspondence, but we've got nothing about combining, and we've got nothing about subtraction at all. What happens if you have 5 toys on your table and 1 toy is taken away? There's nothing about that in the Cambridge prior learnings. So our author thought that's a bit of a miss. This is something that it's not teasing out what's in the Cambridge prior learnings, it's actually adding to the Cambridge prior learnings. So our author thought that, in very practical ways that are age appropriate with young children, when you're learning through play, we talked yesterday about how the approach in the course is to learn through play and by doing and by experience. When you're learning through play, when you've got children and they're playing with their toys and they've got 4 toys on their table, why don't you take 1 toy away and use that as an introduction to subtraction? Why don't you add in 2 more toys and use that as an introduction to addition? So within the progression and the scope and sequence that we've developed to lead up to Cambridge Stage 1, we're bringing in simple, practical, age-appropriate ways of introducing addition and subtraction in Foundation, and then going a bit further in Foundation Plus to make sure that students have been introduced to the concepts of addition and subtraction before they embark on these really important concepts in Stage 1. So with maths, we've had to tease out and put in the detailed development between prior learning to Stage 1 so that we can be very explicit about what the prior learnings mean and be very explicit about how they actually lead to Stage 1 for students. And we've also had to add in where we feel that the prior learnings have missed key concepts such as addition and subtraction. We've done the same with English, and it's harder to explain in English, but we've gone through exactly the same approach. We've looked at the Cambridge prior learnings, and we've looked at the Cambridge Stage 1 learnings, and we've said, okay, do these do the trick? Are these prior learnings going to get students really in the right place to embark on Cambridge Stage 1? And as you know, Cambridge Stage 1, students are reading pretty much from day 1 in Cambridge Stage 1 with the Cambridge Mother Tongue syllabus, which all of you follow in international schools in India. So given that children might be coming from a Hindi speaking background or a Tamil speaking background, it's quite a big ask. So we've also really considered the fact that students are going to be using Foundation English and Foundation Plus English in a second language, in what for many of them may be a second language environment. So do the Cambridge prior learnings get students where we need them to be for Stage 1? We're going to look at a couple of examples. So the first example that we're going to look at is with writing. Develop some early writing skills, including forming some letters, using a finger in the air, sand, paintbrush, writing own name, beginning to write some simple words. And our author said, okay, do these really get me to what I'm going to have to be doing in Cambridge Stage 1? identifying the most common letters, graphemes, the sounds associated with each, looking at some key consonant digraphs, relating rhyme to spelling patterns, exploring the use of plurals. Are these prior learnings going to get me in good shape for what I'm going to be doing in stage 1? So what our author has done is to, again, take these prior learnings and really flesh them out. So in foundation, we have, yes, let's focus on the pre-reading skills in foundation. Mark making, scribbling, making letter shapes, tracing lines and shapes, tracing shapes of letters in paint, water, clay, or sand. Draw purposeful, but we go a bit further than, and are a bit more explicit than what's in the prior learnings in Cambridge. Draw purposeful horizontal and vertical lines. Draw them with an intention to draw them. Draw rotational and trajectory patterns. Understand that what you write down, you can sound out. Trace letters of the alphabet with guidance. Tracing, not writing independently, tracing. And very importantly, what's missing from the Cambridge prior learnings is start to develop the fine motor skills, the muscle skills that will allow the child to hold a pencil, hold a pen, hold a crayon, and actually make meaningful marks with that implement. Completely missing from the prior learnings. So this is what we do in Foundation. And then in Foundation Plus, we consolidate these early writing skills using a range of media to form letters. So again, we carry on with clay, playing with sand, air writing, using pencils and crayons. We're writing our own name using lowercase and initial capital letters. It's nothing about capital letters in the prior learnings. And we're starting to write simple words and to use correct letter formation, to relate rhyme to shared patterns. Not very much about rhyme in the prior learnings. So you can see we are teasing out the prior learnings for English, and we're adding to them where we feel they don't go far enough in terms of preparing students for the skills they are going to need to develop in stage 1. We're trying to give students a better starting point for stage 1. We can also look at an example from reading. So the Cambridge, this is quite complicated because there's so much more written for reading. But if we look at the Cambridge prior learnings for reading, we've got develop awareness of sound structures in spoken words, clapping syllables, recognizing rhyming words, and we actually take these prior learnings and flesh them out in a lot more detail. So become aware of sound structures, yes, clap them out and sing sounds. So I'm just moving some things around on my screen. Let me close that little box down. But also things like marching to the beat. So don't forget, we're doing all of this in an environment that is encouraging play and children learning through doing and through experience. So we're building in a lot of activity. So you can see we're fleshing these out in a lot of detail. And by the time we get to Foundation Plus, these very simple prior learnings that Cambridge list have become very detailed. Develop an increasing awareness of sound structures in language. Play rhyming games, recognize rhyming words, clap for each word in a sentence, clap for syllables. That goes beyond what is in the Cambridge prior learning. But if children are clapping for 1, 2, 3, 4, and if they're clapping for happy and sad and hello, that's great. Let's push them a little bit further and get them to clap hello, happy, goodbye. So we're going a little bit further than the Cambridge prior learnings would suggest. All to get students ready for what they're going to be doing in stage 1. So this is quite a complicated slide. What I've done here is I've taken away the Cambridge prior learnings and we're just looking at some selected stage 1 learning objectives, and identifying the fact that the Collins progression for English is really putting students into a good place to be really ready for these. So we've got knowing the letters of their own name, which relates directly to some of the things they're going to be doing in stage 1. Know sight words like stop, the, in contexts in which they will be typically used. There's not much about sight words in the Cambridge Prior Learnings, but these are very important words for students. Begin to blend phonemes into words. By the end of Foundation Plus, students will be able to blend and decode words that use the most common 7 phonemes in English, which are s, t, n, I, p, a. So 6, and as well. So by the time students get to the end of Foundation Plus with Collins, they're going to be able to read words like sat, nip, tap, pin, hat, mat. So they're starting to learn how to decode in Foundation and can do it by the end of Foundation Plus, which sets them in really good stead for stage 1 when they're really starting to read English in their textbooks, their students' books. And you can see the same in Foundation Plus with reading, really starting to get students ready for the skills and the learning objectives that they're going to be achieving in stage 1. So as with maths, it's about teasing out what's already in the Cambridge Prior Learnings, but it's also about adding in what we think might be missing. And I know that reading for inference, reading for implied meaning, which is something that's tested for in IGCSE English very many years down the line, is something that many students struggle with. And when we look at the Cambridge Learning Objectives in stage 1, they're already starting to bring in explore implicit meanings in simple texts, anticipate what happens next in a story, and make simple inferences based on events in a text. Now, there is no preparation in the Cambridge Prior Learnings for any of these learning objectives. And these, of course, relate to critical thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. So we've thought about this and we think, actually, yes, the children may only be 4.5 years old, 5 years old, but that doesn't mean to say we can't start looking and using pictures in texts as clues to support understanding. And it doesn't mean we can't start asking students to guess and predict and try and confirm what's going to happen next. So this is just an example of where in English we've brought in a little bit more than is in the prior learnings to help make sure students have already started to develop the skills that they're going to develop further in stage 1. I leave it to stage 1. We can be doing it now. And we're going to use this as a little example. We looked at this example yesterday when I was doing my quick run through of the components, and there is audio for the course. And this is a story from Foundation Plus that we can use to help students start to develop some of these skills of reading, using pictures for meaning, and trying to think about what might happen next, higher order thinking skills. So I'll just play this audio. Nidhi, if you can just check that everybody and give me a thumbs up that you can hear the audio.
Sure.
I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
The picnic.
It's audible.
The rug.
Thanks.
The basket. The cakes. The drinks. The wasps.
Great. So a simple story in Foundation Plus, where we're looking at reading some simple CVC words, rug. We've got wasp, which is a little bit more complex, but not too hard. Basket, cakes, obviously the sight word, the. And in the teacher's guide, and in the activity book, there are lots of activities around writing some of the letters, reading some of the words, reusing some of these letters, these phonemes and graphemes in own writing.
The picnic.
Oh, sorry, that's not what I meant to do.
The rug.
Thank you. But in the teacher's guide, we also say, why not use this to do some picture reading? Ask students what's going on in the picnic. Look at this picture. What's happening? What's the man putting on the ground? And importantly, what do you think is going to happen in this story based on this picture? Get students try to tell you what they think is going to happen. Now, there's an ebook version of this, so you can display it on your whiteboard or your big screen, so all of the students are looking at the same page. Just display this page. What do they think is going to happen? What's happening in this picture? The man is putting out a blanket or a rug. The little boy is kneeling down. Mum is holding a basket. Ask them, what do they think is in the basket? Food, miss, food and things to drink. So they're starting to predict what they think is going to happen. This is very early precursor work for inference and reading for inference and reading for implied meaning. And then we can look at the last page, the wasps. Who else is coming to the picnic? What is going to happen next? And can they suggest a different ending? Can they suggest an ending? What will the family do? For example, will they go home? Will they go inside? Will they run away? Will someone get stung? What happens next if someone gets stung? There are lots of ways that you can use this very simple story to bring in picture reading and some very early skills for reading for inference. Great. So for English and science, we started with the prior learnings in the Cambridge syllabuses, the Cambridge frameworks. We looked at the stage ones. We filled in the gaps. We filled in some of the details, made the steps very explicit, and we've brought in additional areas, additional topics, additional concepts where we felt the prior learnings didn't adequately prepare students for stage one. For science, for topic work, it's different and very much easier because there are no primary learnings. So our authors and development editors simply looked at what students are going to be doing in stage one and thought, okay, how am I going to cover some of these topics, some of these aspects, some of these learnings, some of these skills, very importantly, skills in foundation. So you can see here, I've just included one example, stage one, physics. Students are going to learn about forces and energy. They're going to explore, talk about and describe the movement of familiar objects, to describe pushes and pulls as forces and explore that some objects float and some objects sink. So very simply in foundation, we're looking at how pushes and pulls can make toys and other objects move. And we're going to find different ways to safely stop small toys that may be moving in play equipment. So we're going to be looking at putting a little boat in water and pushing it along. And we're going to be talking about how pushing it in water makes it move. And we're going to be looking at rolling balls and thinking, how can we stop the ball rolling safely? And then taking that a little bit further in Foundation Plus, talking about sinking and floating. And then again, here's another example from light and sound and electricity and magnetism. So light and sound, students in stage one will be identifying different sources of sound, and they'll be understanding that sound travels. As sound travels from a source, it becomes quieter. So we'll be looking at just playing around with and experimenting sounds and loud sounds and soft sounds. So introducing children to the concept of something that's really quiet and something that's really loud. Why not? They're only very young. They can be introduced to these concepts early. And then we've got electricity and magnetism. In stage one, students will be identifying things that require electricity and talking about and describing what happens with magnets when they approach different materials. So in Foundation and Foundation Plus, we're looking at simple light sources. And we're going to note in Foundation Plus, we're looking at magnets, just playing around with magnets and large metal objects in the classroom and seeing what happens. So in a way, easier for science because we didn't have to worry too much about what Cambridge think the prior learnings are. But still a very interesting task. So this work gave us a draft syllabus that we then discussed with our school review panel. And we then looked at what we had against a number of syllabuses and best practice around the world. The National Education Policy in India, the UK Early Years Framework, the IBPYP, and other international curricula. Now, there is no detail that I can access as yet on the NCPFECE, the new National Curricular and Pedagogical Framework for Early Childhood Education that the NCERT are admitting. There's nothing yet that I can access or that has been shared with publishers. But we know that it's going to be a multifaceted framework comprising alphabets, languages, numbers, reading, writing, colour, indoor play, outdoor play, logical thinking, puzzles, problem solving. Remember what happens next in the WASP story? Problem solving. So we've used this very simple information as much as we can. And we've also used this slide, learning in the formative years. And the key thing here is the yellow patch over on the right-hand side, play-based and discovery-based learning. So there's lots of teamwork and collaboration, but the approach that we take in the course is very play-based and very based on children doing experiential learning, discovery-based learning. But there's no flesh on the bones of what's going to be in the NEP for early years yet for us to take into account. And then we went back to the Cambridge overarching syllabuses for primary and lower secondary and looked at the elements that are not adequately covered by Cambridge's own admission in their new early years programme. So thinking and working mathematically, thinking and working scientifically, science in context, and links between reading and writing. And we've made sure that we've brought all of these in. So thinking and working mathematically, an explanation of what it is and how to do it in the kindergarten classroom is provided in the teacher's guide, with ideas in the units themselves and in the teaching notes. Thinking and working scientifically is a strand in our learning objectives for science, and also how to do it, what it means in the kindergarten context is clearly explained in the teacher's guide. And it's very simple for science, as you would expect. It's getting children to do things and to observe what they're doing, to observe the reactions of things, to plant a seed in a pot, in some soil, on the windowsill, and to water it, and to every day to look to see what's happening and to record their observations, to draw what they see every day and to plot how it's growing. And learning objectives explain how to incorporate thinking and working scientifically within each of the units that we have in the course and within each of the learning sessions. And then for English, again, teaching English young children reading and writing and how to incorporate the two and how to develop the two side by side, hand in hand, is explained in the teaching guide. So we made sure that we're adequately covering all of the other requirements of children going into a Cambridge system. And this gave us our vertical learning objectives from Foundation to Foundation Plus to Stage 1, so that you can be confident that your students have got a seamless progression. We then looked at the progression within levels, and this is all explained in detail in the teacher's guides. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but our authors have put together a careful progression of the learning objectives. For science, explained in a chart at the beginning of the introduction and in each of the unit overviews, and the same for English, a much more complicated chart for English. And you'll note for English that there is a lot of revision, recycling, and revisiting of learning objectives all the way through the course. Because we know with English, children need to be encountering the same phonemes and graphemes, the same words, the same vocabulary, the same grammar structures on a very regular basis. So you can see playing rhyming games, recognizing rhyming words is covered in units. This is just foundation. 2, 3, 6, 10, 11, 12, 14 and 15. So there's lots of repetition. So children are starting to get very familiar and very comfortable. Singing songs, marching to the beat of the music. Units 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 13 and 14. Not the same content, something different every time, going a little bit further, but repeating and revising and rehashing. So early reading skills, recognizing sounds and letters, all are revisited, recycled, revised. So students have plenty of opportunity to learn. Also, of course, fully described within each of the units. And then within maths, the author has again listed all of the learning objectives and the units that they are covered in. But uniquely for maths, he breaks these learning objectives down further. And this is all described in the teacher's guide. So you'll see here, these are the learning objectives for Foundation Unit 1 and Unit 2. And in Unit 1, we're introducing number, counting and understanding number. So we want students to say and use the number names in order in familiar contexts, such as number rhymes, songs, stories, counting games, and activities from 1 to 5. 1 to 10 is grayed out. It's part of the overall learning objective, but it isn't covered in this unit. We're going to do 1 to 5 first. We don't want children getting confused. We want them to be comfortable with 1 to 5 first. And then we're going to count objects from 1 to 5, reciting number names in units. And then we move on in Unit 2. And you can see that in Unit 2, some of the learning objectives are in italics. These are the learning objectives that have already been covered in the course that we're going to revisit and revise. So what's in italics is what you're revisiting and revising in this unit. What's in bold is what's introduced new. And what's in grey is part of the learning objective that is not yet being covered and that will be covered later in the course. So students have an opportunity to build up their number skills, their math skills, in a very structured step-by-step way. So, as a summary, before I move on to any questions, we did a very critical review of the prior learnings that are listed explicitly in the Cambridge frameworks for English and maths and stage 1. And we developed, teased out, thought through what sits between the prior learnings and the stage 1 learnings. And we brought in elements, components, topics, learning objectives that we felt were missing from the prior learnings and could be suitably covered in age-appropriate ways through play, through discovery, with children in an early years setting. We got feedback from our international review panel. We reviewed what we had against the NEP, the UK curriculum, the IB, PYP, and other international curricula. We made sure we were bringing in the other Cambridge requirements for stage 1 and beyond, thinking and working mathematically, thinking and working scientifically, science in context, integrated reading and writing skills. And then our authors took all of this and developed the progression within the levels. So we did a lot of work and a lot of thinking. We didn't take the Cambridge learning objectives, the Cambridge prior learnings, and say, right, we're writing a course for this. We thought about whether the prior learnings really were equipping students for stage 1, thought critically about that, with the aim, of course, of being that you can do Foundation, Foundation Plus, and Stage 1, and it's a seamless progression for students. Thank you. Are there any questions? Anything anybody would like to ask? Please don't hesitate.
So you may also use the chat window to
yes,
to just type in your queries, or you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Okay, so Ms. Tulsi is asking whether do we need to plan term-wise plan?
There's a very clear term-wise plan in the course. The course, each level, for English, Maths and Science, Foundation and Foundation Plus. Each level contains 15 units, 5 units per term. You start with Unit 1 and you work through Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, Unit 5 in order. We've done the ordering for you. Each unit takes 2 weeks, and within each unit for English and each unit for Maths, there are 8 formally structured learning sessions for you to use, with lots of ideas and activities, and an expectation that if you do English every day and Maths every day, as we know you do in India, that you have lots of content to provide enough for your full weeks of learning.
Okay, I hope it answers your question, Ms. Tulsi.
So that is all provided in the teacher's guide. It's a very clear course to follow. Assessment. So I see someone's asking about assessment. So best practice is not to assess students in kindergarten because they're too young. But we know that that is not an acceptable answer for parents and for school principals and school owners. So we've done 2 things. In the teacher's guide, there are clear guidance on how to assess and evaluate young children, how we should be assessing them, what we should be looking for. We provide a list of charts and tables for you to download free of charge and print off and fill in and use for your own students to say when they've achieved each of the learning objectives, so you can track and monitor their progress. Now, the activity books, we have activity books for the student for each term, for each of English, Maths and Science. And the last page of each activity book is a report for you, the teacher, to fill in against a simplified list of learning objectives. And you mark whether the child has achieved that learning objective, has exceeded that learning objective, or is still working towards that learning objective. You send the activity book home. The parent has an opportunity to review the activity book, and there's even a box for the parent to sign the back page to say, yes, I've seen what my child has achieved. So that's the materials that we provide for assessment and for you to be able to report achievement back to the parent.
So Dr. Elaine, one of the participants has asked whether they can swap the units.
Swap the units round, do them in a different order. Not for English and Science, no, because they've been carefully structured to build on what goes before. But for Science, you can do them in any order if you want to, yes, but not for English and not for Maths, because they've been very carefully structured, so it's a very step-by-step clear progression for the students.
Okay, and Ms. Sheila has asked if you can repeat the 6 sounds, please.
Repeat the
6 sounds.
Oh, the 6 most common sounds in the English language are the phonemes s, t, n, p, I, a. S, a, t, n, I, p. And then the next one after that is m.
Okay, any other questions, anybody? I hope we have answered all your questions. So CVC words for E.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, CVC words, yes, definitely. CYC words are definitely appropriate, and there are lots of CYC words, particularly in Foundation, particularly using s, a, t, n, I, p, because those are the most common. And once you've grasped those 6 graphemes and the sounds they make, the phonemes, there are lots of words you can read, but we do also bring in other phonemes, other phonemes, other graphemes as relevant in the stories. But the real focus is getting everybody confident and comfortable decoding using those, and then we go a bit further in Foundation Plus.
Okay, so Miss Forum has asked, where can we find answers to science workbook of stage 1?
In the teacher's guide. Oh no, we don't. We don't provide answers. We're putting answers together for science stage 1 at the moment.
Okay, and what about the online learning mode?
So online learning is difficult. We know that many schools around the world, don't forget this is an international course, may not have online access, but there are the reading anthologies and the activity books are all available as ebooks for you to download and project on a whiteboard, use on a whiteboard or project on a screen. The teacher's guides are also available as ebooks, and they're also downloadable as Word files. And also for maths, we also provide some PowerPoints to use as classroom stimulus to start learning sessions off. And for maths, there are also 8 simple digital tools that are available online for you to use in the classroom, doing simple number and sorting games and activities.
So great. I think we have addressed all the questions asked by the participants. And participants, for any further questions, you can write to us at collinsinternational/India@harpercollins.co.in. The same has also been sent via the chat box. Please note it down. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask.
There's a question from Miss Lakshmi about any additional worksheets. Yes, in the teacher's guides, there are also additional worksheets for you to use if you need them. The idea is that the reading anthology and the activity book should give you everything you need. But if your students need additional practice, or you have time that you wish to fill, or you wish to send work home with them, even though they're only babies, there are additional worksheets that can be downloaded. Is it flexible for virtual teaching? Well, yes, because you have ebooks of the activity books and of the reading anthologies. So you can use your ebooks to teach virtually. Any other questions? No other questions?
No, Dr. Elaine, I don't think so. There are any questions.
Thank you.
So thanks so much, Dr. Elaine, for a wonderful project brief. And I think a lot of work has gone into it. The series looks really promising. Thanks a lot. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining the session today. And please do get in touch with us in case you have any further questions. We'll be happy to assist. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful evening, all of you. Please stay safe. It's very important.
Thank you. Thank you.